The cold nights. The wedding was held on a crisp October afternoon in Lincoln Park, Chicago. The leaves had just begun to turn, painting the city in shades of amber and rust. Daniel Reed stood beneath a white archway wrapped in ivy, watching Vanessa. Morgan walked toward him in a satin gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her smile was poised, her steps graceful. To everyone watching, they were the perfect couple. Two professionals, deeply in love, ready to build a life together. Daniel believed it too. The reception was held at a rooftop venue overlooking the skyline. Laughter echoed between champagne flutes and fairy lights. Vanessa's parents beamed with pride. Daniel's younger sister cried during the toast. Photographers captured every moment: the first dance, the cake cutting, the stolen glances. It was a day built on promises. But the nights that followed told a different story. Their new condo in River North was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city that felt like a dream. On their first night as husband and wife, Daniel lit candles, played soft jazz, and waited for her to join him in bed. She said she was tired. The second night, she scrolled through her phone until she fell asleep. The third, she claimed a migraine. The fourth, she had an early meeting. And so it continued, night after night, rejection after rejection. Daniel tried not to take it personally. He told himself marriage was an adjustment. Maybe she needed time. Maybe she was nervous. He brought her coffee in the mornings, left notes in her purse, and cooked her favorite meals. He even booked a weekend getaway to Lake Geneva, hoping a change of scenery might spark something, but nothing changed. Vanessa remained distant, emotionally and physically. She laughed at memes on her phone, but never at his jokes. She hugged her coworkers in photos, but barely touched him. Daniel began to feel like a roommate, not a husband. He didn't tell anyone. Not his best friend, Marcus. Not his sister, Lily. He was embarrassed, ashamed, confused. He had married a woman who wouldn't even hold his hand. By the third week, Daniel stopped trying. He slept on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what he had done wrong. He replayed every moment, the proposal, the wedding, the honeymoon, searching for clues. And then came the 30th night. He had made dinner: rosemary chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and a bottle of her favorite Pinot Noir. She barely touched her plate. After dinner, she retreated to the bedroom, curled up with her phone, and turned away. Daniel sat beside her, heart pounding. "Vanessa," he said softly, "we've been married a month. You haven't touched me once. What's going on?" She didn't look at him, didn't blink. Her voice was cold, clipped. "My body, my choice," she said. "You have no right." Daniel felt the words like a slap. Not just the content, but the delivery. No empathy. No explanation. Just a wall. He lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was steady beside him, but it felt like she was miles away. He realized then that she hadn't just denied him intimacy. She had denied him respect, partnership, love. And in that silence, Daniel made a decision. He would go to court, not to fight for her affection, not to beg for her love, but to dissolve the marriage. Because if this was Vanessa's vision of what marriage meant, a cold transaction, a performance for social media, then he wanted no part of it. What Daniel didn't know was that his decision would ignite a chain of events that none of them expected. And when the truth came out, it wouldn't just be about intimacy. It would be about betrayal, greed, and a revenge Vanessa never saw coming. The decision Daniel sat at the kitchen island, staring at the untouched glass of wine he had poured hours earlier. The city lights flickered outside the window, casting long shadows across the marble countertops. Vanessa was asleep in the bedroom, or at least pretending to be. Her phone had buzzed twice with messages from someone named Elle, but Daniel didn't care enough to check anymore. He felt hollow, not angry, not even sad, just emptied. He opened his laptop and typed one word into the search bar: divorce. Then he paused. Was he really ready for this? Was he giving up? Too soon? 30 days wasn't a lifetime? But it felt like one when you spent every night beside someone who treated you like furniture. He closed the laptop and picked up his phone. Marcus Taylor had been his best friend since college, a sharp-witted, no-nonsense divorce attorney who had seen every kind of marital disaster imaginable. Daniel hesitated, then sent a text. "Need to talk. Not urgent, but important." Marcus replied within seconds. "Come by tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring coffee." Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay awake, replaying every moment of the past month. The wedding, the silence, the rejection. Her words. "My body, my choice. You have no right," echoed like a curse. The next morning, he arrived at Marcus's office with 2 lattes and a heart full of questions. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, eyeing Daniel carefully. "You look like hell." Daniel chuckled weakly. "I feel worse." They talked for an hour. Daniel laid everything out. The cold nights, the emotional distance, the confrontation. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When Daniel finished, Marcus leaned forward. "You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. This isn't about sex. It's about intent. And from what you've told me, Vanessa's intent is questionable." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Marcus tapped his pen. "You said she rushed you through the marriage paperwork. Did you read everything?" Daniel hesitated. "Not really. She said it was standard. Just signatures." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Bring me the documents. All of them. Tonight." Daniel spent the afternoon digging through their filing cabinet. He found the marriage license, the prenuptial agreement, which Vanessa had insisted wasn't necessary, but had still drafted, and a strange addendum labeled Mutual Financial Understanding. He hadn't remembered signing that. He brought everything to Marcus, who spent an hour reviewing the papers. Then he looked up, his expression grim. "She buried a clause," Marcus said. "Right here. If the marriage ends due to fraud, deception, or bad faith, she forfeits all claims to joint property and must return any gifts or financial support." Daniel blinked. "She signed that?" Marcus nodded. "Her lawyer added it, probably thinking you'd never call her bluff." Daniel sat back stunned. "So if I prove she married me under pretenses, she gets nothing," Marcus said. "Not a dime." Daniel felt a flicker of something. Not joy, not revenge, just clarity. He had been played, and now he had the rules of the game. That night, Daniel sat on the couch, scrolling through Vanessa's social media. Her posts were curated perfection. Brunch selfies, motivational quotes, photos of their wedding with captions like, "Forever starts now." But something felt off. He clicked on a tagged photo from one of her friends, Elle Morgan, her cousin. In the comments, someone had written, "Girl, you really did it, secured the bag." Daniel's stomach turned. He clicked on Elle's profile. It was public. He scrolled through her posts, looking for anything. And then he found a screenshot of a group chat. Vanessa's name was highlighted. "Don't worry, girls. I didn't marry him for love. I just needed the security. Once I get access to his accounts, he'll be nothing but a stepping stone." Daniel stared at the screen, heart pounding. He took a screenshot. Then another. Then another. The messages were dated 2 weeks before the wedding. He called Marcus. "I have proof," Daniel said. "She planned this." Marcus's voice was calm. "Then we go to court." Daniel hung up and looked around the condo. The place he had decorated with her in mind. The place he had imagined raising children, celebrating anniversaries, growing. Old. It was all a lie. But now, he had the truth. And the truth was about to become his weapon. The courtroom. The Cook County Courthouse loomed like a fortress of truth and consequence. Daniel Reed stood outside its limestone facade, clutching a folder of evidence and trying to steady his breath. The autumn wind whipped through the plaza, scattering leaves across the steps. He wasn't nervous. He was resolved. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of paper and old wood polish, the kind of place where lives were rewritten with ink and signatures. Daniel sat beside his attorney, Ethan Cole, a quiet, deliberate man with a talent for letting facts speak louder than emotion. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes late. She wore a tailored charcoal suit, her hair in a sleek bun, her heels clicking confidently across the marble floor. Her attorney, Cynthia Alvarez, followed close behind, flipping through a leather-bound case file. Vanessa didn't look at Daniel. Not once. Judge Harold Whitmore entered the room, his presence commanding. He adjusted his glasses and scanned the docket. Case 23-1097. Reed v. Morgan. Petition for dissolution of marriage filed by Mr. Daniel Reed. Daniel stood. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Whitmore nodded. Let's begin. Cynthia Alvarez rose first, her voice smooth and practiced. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Vanessa Morgan Reed, is deeply disappointed by the petitioner's decision to file for dissolution so soon after their wedding. 30 days is hardly enough time to adjust to married life. My client believes this is a case of impatience, not incompatibility. Vanessa finally looked at Daniel, not with sadness but with disdain. He's unstable, she said. Demanding, controlling. I couldn't breathe in that marriage. Daniel didn't flinch. Ethan Cole stood next. Your Honor, my client entered this marriage in good faith. For 30 consecutive nights, he was denied not only intimacy, but any form of affection. When he asked why, Mrs. Morgan Reed responded with the words, "My body, my choice. You have no right." The courtroom stirred. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. Is that accurate, Mrs. Morgan Reed? Vanessa shrugged. I have the right to my body. That's not a crime. Ethan continued. This case is not about physical intimacy alone. It's about respect, trust, and intent. And we have reason to believe Mrs. Morgan Reed never intended to fulfill the role of a spouse. Her motives were financial. Cynthia Alvarez scoffed. That's a serious accusation. Where's the proof? Daniel stood, his voice calm. I found messages, conversations between Vanessa and her friends. She bragged about marrying for security, about keeping me desperate until she could access my accounts. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Judge Whitmore raised a brow. Do you have these messages? Ethan handed the bailiff a thick folder. Screenshots, dated 2 weeks before the wedding. The judge flipped through the pages, his expression hardening. Don't worry, girls. I didn't marry him for love. I just needed the security. Once I get access to his accounts, he'll be nothing but a stepping stone. Vanessa's face paled. Her hands trembled against the table. Another message. A month of rejection will keep him off balance. He'll be too desperate to fight me when I push for control of the finances. Cynthia Alvarez shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa tried to speak, her voice cracking. Those were jokes, private conversations. He's twisting it. Judge Whitmore tapped his gavel once. Enough. These are your words. This court will treat them as evidence of intent. Daniel sat in silence, letting the weight of her betrayal fill the room. Judge Whitmore turned to Ethan. You mentioned a contract? Ethan nodded. Yes, Your Honor. A marriage addendum signed by both parties. It includes a clause stating that if the marriage ends due to fraud or deception, the respondent forfeits all claims to joint property and must return any financial gifts. The judge read the document carefully. Then he looked at Vanessa. You attempted to deceive this court and your spouse from the beginning. This contract is enforceable. The petitioner is absolved of all financial responsibility. The respondent forfeits her claims effective immediately. Vanessa stood, trembling. No, this isn't fair. He tricked me. Judge Whitmore's voice was firm. You signed the document. You sent the messages. This court finds sufficient evidence of bad faith. The gavel struck, and just like that, the courtroom doors might as well have slammed shut on the life Vanessa thought she had secured. She had tried to use the law to bleed Daniel dry. Instead, the law had become the blade that gutted her schemes. Daniel walked out of the courthouse calm, composed, and free. Not because he had won, but because he had reclaimed his dignity, and Vanessa, she had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The fallout. Thine. Courtroom verdict echoed far beyond the marble walls of Cook County. Within hours, whispers turned into wildfire. Vanessa Morgan had walked into court with a smirk and walked out with nothing. No financial claim, no marital dignity, no defense. But the real punishment hadn't even begun. Daniel Reed didn't post about the verdict. He didn't gloat. He simply returned to his condo, packed a few essentials, and moved into a short-term rental in the West Loop. He needed space, not just from Vanessa, but from the memories she had poisoned. Meanwhile, Vanessa's world began to collapse. The group chat, the one where she had bragged about marrying for security, had been leaked. Screenshots circulated among her friends, her colleagues, even her extended family. The message that started it all. "Don't worry, girls. I didn't marry him for love. I just needed the security." It was Elle Morgan, her cousin, who had accidentally exposed it. She had posted a celebratory photo from the wedding with a caption that read, "Queen moves only." Someone commented, "You really bagged him," and Elle replied with a laughing emoji and a screenshot of Vanessa's message. That screenshot made its way to Reddit, then Twitter, then a local gossip blog. By the end of the week, Vanessa was infamous. Her friends, the brunch circle, the yoga crew, the marketing clique, began to distance themselves. Some blocked her. Others sent cold texts like, "I can't be associated with this." One even posted a vague Instagram story. "Some people will do anything for money. Sad." Vanessa's phone stopped buzzing. Her mother, Ellen Morgan, was livid. She had defended Vanessa's marriage to skeptical relatives, insisting her daughter had found a good man. Now she was the subject of whispers at church, at book club, even at the grocery store. At a family dinner Daniel didn't attend, Ellen reportedly slammed her wine glass on the table and said, "Do you realize what shame you've brought to this family?" Vanessa tried to explain. "It was just a joke. I didn't mean it." But no one believed her anymore. Her uncle, a retired judge, refused to speak to her. Her younger cousin unfollowed her on every platform. Even her grandmother, who had once called her "my shining star," stopped answering her calls. The fallout wasn't just personal, it was professional. Vanessa worked at a mid-sized marketing firm in the Loop, where reputation mattered as much as performance. Her manager called her in for a private conversation. "We're not firing you," he said, "but we're reassigning your accounts. Some clients have expressed discomfort." Vanessa's name was quietly removed from pitch decks. Her email signature lost its title. Promotions she had been promised were suddenly on hold. She tried to salvage her image, posting motivational quotes, sharing charity links, even uploading a photo of herself volunteering at a food bank, but the comments were brutal. "Too late. You used a man, now you're using charity. We see you." Daniel watched from afar, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. She had claimed, "My body, my choice." But in the end, the real choice had never been hers. The law chose to expose her. Her friends chose to abandon her. Her family chose to shame her. Her career chose to erase her. And Daniel, he chose peace. The rebuild. The apartment in West Loop was small, sunlit and quiet, a far cry from the sleek condo Daniel had once shared with Vanessa. It had exposed brick walls, a creaky wooden floor, and a view of the L train that rattled by every 20 minutes. But it was his, and for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt like he could breathe. He spent the first few days in solitude. No social media, no news, just books, long walks, and silence. He cooked for himself, not to impress anyone, but because he enjoyed it. He started journaling, something he hadn't done since college, and filled pages with thoughts he hadn't dared speak aloud. One entry read, "She didn't break me. She just reminded me how much I needed to rebuild." Lily visited often, bringing groceries and warmth. She never pried, never pushed, just sat beside him on the couch, watching old movies and occasionally squeezing his hand. "You're doing better than most would," she said one night, as they watched Good Will Hunting for the third time. Daniel smiled. "I'm just trying to remember who I was before her." He started therapy with Dr. Marla Jensen, a soft-spoken woman with silver hair and a knack for asking the right questions. "What did you lose in that marriage?" she asked during their first session. Daniel thought for a moment. "Trust, not just in her, in myself." Dr. Jensen nodded. Then let's work on getting that back. Week by week, Daniel peeled back the layers. He talked about the wedding, the rejection, the courtroom, and the fallout. He cried once, not because of Vanessa, but because he realized how much of himself he had given away without ever being asked. He began running again, early morning jogs along the lakefront, headphones in, heart pounding. He joined a local book club. He even signed up for a cooking class, where he met people who didn't know his story, didn't judge, didn't ask. Marcus checked in occasionally, always brief, always supportive. "You're rebuilding," he said over coffee one morning, brick by brick. Daniel nodded. "And this time I'm choosing the foundation." He didn't date, not yet. He wasn't ready, but he smiled more, slept better, laughed louder. One evening, he walked past a wedding in Millennium Park. The bride was twirling under fairy lights, her groom beaming beside her. Daniel paused, watching from a distance. He didn't feel bitterness. He felt hope, because love wasn't the enemy, deception was, and now he knew the difference. The unexpected letter. It had been 42 days since the courtroom verdict. Daniel Reed hadn't heard a word from Vanessa Morgan. No calls, no texts, no emails. Her silence was a relief, a clean break from the chaos she had created. He had moved on, slowly but surely, rebuilding his life brick by brick. Then the letter arrived. It was a plain white envelope, no return address, slipped through the mail slot of his West Loop apartment. Daniel stared at it for a long time before opening it. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, elegant, calculated. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Daniel, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect understanding. But I need to say something. Not for you, but for me. I was wrong. Not just in what I did, but in how I saw you. I thought marriage was a transaction. I thought love was leverage. I thought I could control everything. I was wrong. You didn't deserve what I did to you. You were kind, patient, and generous. And I used that against you. I've lost everything. My friends, my family's respect, my career. But the worst part is knowing I lost someone who actually cared. I'm not asking for a response. I just needed you to know. Vanessa." Daniel read the letter twice, then a third time. He didn't feel anger. He didn't feel pity. He felt nothing. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not out of sentiment, but out of closure. Later that evening, Lily stopped by with Thai takeout. They ate on the balcony, watching the sun dip below the skyline. "You okay?" she asked, noticing his quiet mood. Daniel nodded. "She sent a letter." Lily raised an eyebrow. "What did it say?" "That she was sorry. That she lost everything." Lily leaned back. "Do you believe her?" Daniel thought for a moment. "I believe she regrets the consequences. I don't know if she regrets the choices." They sat in silence for a while, the city humming below them. Finally, Lily said, "You don't owe her anything. Not even a reaction." Daniel smiled. "I know." He didn't respond to the letter. He didn't post about it. He didn't tell Marcus or Dr. Jensen. He simply let it be. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest answer, and Daniel had already said everything he needed to. In court, in healing, in choosing peace. The new beginning, it started with a painting. Daniel. Reed had wandered into a small gallery in Lakeview on a rainy Saturday afternoon. He wasn't looking for anything, just shelter from the drizzle and a distraction from the quiet ache that sometimes crept in when the city felt too big. The gallery was warm, filled with soft jazz and the scent of coffee. On the far wall hung a canvas that stopped him cold, a swirl of blues and golds, chaotic yet balanced, like a storm learning to dance. He stood in front of it for 10 minutes. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said beside him. He turned to see a woman with auburn hair pulled into a loose braid, wearing a paint-stained denim jacket and a smile that felt like sunlight. Sophie Bennett, she said, extending a hand. I painted that. Daniel shook her hand. Daniel Reed, it's incredible. They talked for 20 minutes about color theory, emotional landscapes, and how art could say what words couldn't. Sophie was an art therapist, working with trauma survivors and children with anxiety. She spoke with warmth, not performance. She listened more than she talked. Daniel didn't mention Vanessa. He didn't mention courtrooms or betrayal. He just talked about the painting. Before he left, Sophie handed him a flyer. I run a community art night every Thursday. No pressure, just people, paint, and peace. Daniel went the following week. He didn't paint much, just a few strokes of green and gray, but he felt something shift. A quiet joy, a sense of belonging. He kept going, week after week. Slowly, he began to open up, not just to Sophie, but to the group. He shared pieces of his story, not as a victim, but as someone learning to rebuild. Sophie never pried. She never asked for details. But one night, as they cleaned brushes together, she said, "You carry yourself like someone who's been broken and rebuilt. That's rare." Daniel smiled. "I'm still under construction." They laughed. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something gentler, a friendship built on mutual respect and quiet understanding. Dr. Marla Jensen noticed the change. "You're lighter," she said during a session. "Not because the pain is gone, but because you've made space for something else." Daniel nodded. "I'm learning that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing what to remember." He remembered the lessons, the red flags, the silence, the betrayal. But he also remembered the strength it took to walk away, the courage to stand in court, the grace to rebuild. One evening, he invited Lily to art night. She painted a chaotic burst of pink and orange and laughed the whole time. "You're really doing it," she said afterward. "You're living again." Daniel looked around the gallery at the people, the colors, the laughter. "Yes," he said, "and this time, I'm choosing every brushstroke." The final closure? It was a Sunday afternoon in early November. The trees in Lincoln Park had shed most of their leaves, leaving behind bare branches that reached toward a gray sky. Daniel Reed walked slowly along the path, hands in his coat pockets, the chill biting at his cheeks. He had just left Sophie's art night, a quiet session filled with laughter, warm cider, and the smell of acrylic paint. He felt good, not euphoric, not healed, but steady. Then his phone buzzed, a message. Unknown number. "Daniel, I know I said I wouldn't reach out again, but I need to see you, just once. Please. Vanessa." Daniel stared at the screen. His heart didn't race. His hands didn't shake. He simply felt tired. He walked to a bench near the pond and sat down. The water was still, reflecting, the overcast sky like a mirror. He read the message again. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he called Lily. "She wants to meet," he said. Lily was quiet for a moment. "What do you want?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "Closure, maybe." "You already have closure," she said gently. "But if you need to hear it from her mouth, do it. Just protect your peace." Daniel agreed to meet Vanessa the next day in a public cafe near the courthouse. Neutral ground. She arrived early, dressed in a simple black coat, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different. Not polished, not smug, just worn. Daniel sat across from her, ordered a tea, and waited. Vanessa spoke first. "I've lost everything," she said. "My job, my friends. My family barely speaks to me." Daniel nodded. "I know. I deserved it," she said. "I know that now. I was selfish. I treated you like a transaction. I thought I was being smart, strategic, but I was cruel." Daniel didn't interrupt. He let her speak. "I didn't expect you to fight back," she continued. "I thought you'd beg. I thought you'd break. But you didn't. You stood up. and I hated you for it. Until I realized I hated myself more. She looked at him, eyes glassy. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. I see what I did. Daniel took a sip of his tea. It was lukewarm, but comforting. I appreciate you saying that, he said. But I don't need it. Vanessa blinked. You don't? No, Daniel said, because I've already moved on. Not to someone else, to myself. I've rebuilt, I've healed, and I'm not angry anymore. Vanessa nodded slowly. I'm glad. Truly. They sat in silence for a moment. The cafe buzzed. Around them, baristas calling orders, couples laughing, the hum of espresso machines. Finally, Vanessa stood. Goodbye, Daniel. He nodded. Goodbye, Vanessa. She walked out into the cold, her figure disappearing into the crowd. Daniel didn't watch her go. He looked down at his tea, then out the window at the city he had reclaimed. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt free, because closure isn't about confrontation. It's about choosing peace over pain, and Daniel had made his choice. The quiet victory. The first snow came early that year. Daniel Reed stood at his window, watching flakes drift past the streetlights like falling stars. The city had quieted, the usual hum of traffic softened by the blanket of white. He sipped his coffee slowly, the warmth grounding him in the tea. Moment. It had been 3 months since the courtroom, 2 months since Vanessa's final letter, and 1 month since Daniel had stopped counting days. He no longer measured time by distance from pain. He measured it by presence. The books he read, the meals he cooked, the conversations that lingered. His apartment had changed, too. The walls now held paintings from art night, some his, some gifted by others. A small shelf held journals, candles, and a photo of him and Lily laughing at a street fair. The space felt lived in. Honest. One Saturday, Sophie invited him to a winter pop-up market in Lincoln Square. They wandered between booths, sipping mulled cider and admiring handmade crafts. Daniel bought a hand-carved wooden box for Lily and a ceramic mug for himself. At one booth, a woman offered custom poetry. Tell me a word, she said, and I'll write you a verse. Daniel thought for a moment, then said, resilience. She smiled and scribbled quickly. The poem was short, but it stayed with him. You bent, but did not break. You burned, but did not fade. You rose not to prove, but to live. He tucked it into his coat pocket. Later that evening, he met Marcus for dinner. They hadn't talked much since the trial, not because of distance, but because Daniel no longer needed advice. He just needed company. You look good, Marcus said, raising a glass. Lighter. Daniel nodded. I feel good. They talked about work, travel plans, and the possibility of Daniel teaching a beginner's art class at Sophie's studio. Marcus teased him about becoming a soft creative, and Daniel laughed, not defensively, but freely. After dinner, Daniel walked home along the lakefront trail. The snow crunched beneath his boots. The lake shimmered under moonlight. He paused at a bench and sat down, watching the water. He thought about Vanessa, not with anger, but with distance. She was a chapter, one that had ended, one that had taught him more than he ever wanted to learn. He thought about Sophie, her kindness, her quiet strength, her ability to see people without needing to fix them. He thought about himself, the man who had once begged for affection, now content in solitude, and he smiled. Because victory doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. In the stillness of a snowy night, in the warmth of a handmade mug, in the laughter shared over dinner, in the peace that comes from choosing yourself. Daniel stood, brushed snow from his coat, and walked home. Not to escape the past, but to embrace the future. Full circle, the air was crisp, the sky a soft winter blue. Daniel Reed walked along the lakefront trail, his boots crunching against the frost-covered path. The lake shimmered beside him, calm and endless. It had been nearly 6 months since the wedding, 6 months since the cold nights, the courtroom, the fallout, and the letter. And yet, it felt like a lifetime ago. He paused at a bench near the water, the same one he had sat on after Vanessa's final message. This time, he wasn't weighed down by memory. He was simply reflecting. His life had changed, not in dramatic, cinematic ways, but in quiet, meaningful ones. He had found rhythm in solitude, joy in creativity, and strength in honesty. He had learned to listen to his own voice, to trust his instincts, and to protect his peace. Sophie Bennett had become a gentle presence in his life. They still met at art night, still shared stories over coffee, still laughed at each other's terrible brushwork. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a connection. One evening she had asked him, "Do you think you'll ever fall in love again?" Daniel had smiled. "I think I'll recognize it when it's real." Lily continued to be his anchor, her support unwavering, her humor sharp, her loyalty fierce. Marcus remained a quiet observer, proud of Daniel's growth, never needing to say much. Daniel had started teaching a beginner's art class at Sophie's studio. His students ranged from teenagers to retirees, each one carrying their own stories, their own scars. He didn't ask for details. He just gave them space to create. One night, a student asked, "How do you know when you've healed?" Daniel thought for a moment, then said, "When you stop needing the apology." He hadn't heard from Vanessa again. He didn't expect to. She had become a shadow, not haunting, just distant. A reminder of what he had survived. He had come full circle, from the hopeful groom in Lincoln Park, to the broken man in River North, to the quiet survivor in West Loop, to the teacher, the artist, the man who chose peace. As he sat on the bench watching the lake, he pulled out a small notebook and scribbled a few lines. "I was not destroyed. I was redirected. And in the silence that followed, I found myself." He closed the notebook and stood. The wind brushed against his face, gentle and cold. The city pulsed behind him, alive with possibility. Daniel Reed walked forward, not away from the past, but toward something new. Not a perfect life, but a true one. The legacy. The studio was quiet, filled with the soft scratch of brushes and the occasional hum of conversation. Daniel Reed stood at the front of the room, watching his students work. Some were teenagers, shy and uncertain. Others were adults carrying invisible burdens. All of them were creating, not masterpieces, but moments. He walked between easels, offering encouragement, adjusting palettes, asking questions like, "What does this color mean to you?" Or, "What would happen if you let the brush wander?" He wasn't teaching technique, he was teaching trust. After class, Sophie approached him with a smile. "You've built something here," she said. "Something real." Daniel looked around the studio, the laughter, the mess, the joy. "I didn't plan it," he said. "I just followed the piece." Later that evening, he sat on the lakefront trail, notebook in hand. He wrote, "I thought my story ended in a courtroom. I thought betrayal was the final chapter, but it wasn't. The final chapter is this: a man who chose dignity, who built again, who taught others to heal, and who learned that love, real love, begins with self-respect." He closed the notebook and watched the lake shimmer under the city lights. Vanessa Morgan had become a footnote, not forgotten, but no longer defining. Her choices had shaped the beginning of his story, but his choices had shaped the end. Daniel Reed was no longer the man who begged for affection. He was the man who taught others to find their voice, to paint their pain, to rewrite their endings, and that, not revenge, not victory, was his legacy. The end.